Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Ed, for the invitation to be with you all this afternoon. I am not 12. I do look like I am 12. I do still get carded for spray paint every single time. And my mom was actually concerned about that fact of me speaking with you guys today. She's like, you need to grow a beard or they're not going to take you seriously. And I was like, Mom, I've been trying to do that for 38 years and it just hasn't come in yet. So, but I'm excited to be with fellow Christian nonprofit leaders. I have a long history in that type of work, and so while I don't know the exact work that you do, I do understand the stressors and pressures of trying to run an organization where your key outcome is impact and how elusive that can be sometimes. So excited to be with y'all. But I'm going to jump right in. Hope is not a strategy. And this is an important truth that I learned on a journey that I hope to spare others from. That journey began about 20 years ago when I unexpectedly walked away from my lifelong dream of being a youth pastor, walked away from the job with our first baby on the way. And this is my wife, Maggie. She's here with me today. She's my partner in crime. First baby on the way, no job lined up, had to move in with mom. That's how challenging that situation was. So what happened? I was about 5 years into being a youth pastor, and our leadership was good at many things, but was not good at everything, of course, right? And one of the things that they were not good at was operations and administration. And oftentimes when we were brought to crucial moments that were operationally or administratively related, there was a competency gap, and what we would hear is, we'll just trust the Lord with that one. And what that meant in actuality was, we're going to ignore that one, and we're gonna see what happens. This was an over-spiritualization of a competency gap. The result was an environment of dysfunction, and that dysfunction allowed harmful things to have room to grow. It would take a lot of counseling, but we now know that we were subjected to a very manipulative and abusive environment for the 5 years that we were there. And I left without a job, but I did leave with a very resolute promise. I will never work for a Christian organization ever again. We left very disenfranchised with Christian institution, with Christian leadership, and really just kind of the idea of like purpose-driven ventures, because we saw visions and hope and promises misused in moments where there's actually technical and operational best practices that can support healthy environments. It took 2.5 years before I would open my Bible again. It took 5.5 years before I would step foot in a church again. And the miracle is, not only did both of those things happen, but God led me to a Christian organization, again, of course, to serve in a very ironic role: lead the operations and team culture. It's funny how our past is often the training ground for our future. So hope is not a strategy. Hope is power. It's wild and it's raw. And as Uncle Ben taught us in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Hope's power is like the wind, something that can level a home in the matter of seconds, which we have been so tragically reminded of in the last few weeks with the hurricanes that have touched Florida. But the wind also, if it's respected and partnered with, can power an entire city. This power is similar to the power of a purpose-driven venture, and people are drawn to its allure. As you can imagine, in this new role that the Lord led me to 4 years after our trauma, I sought to be worthy of this responsibility, and I was not really convinced that I was. My past experience was top of mind, but now I was the architect of the environment. And there was a lot of fear and anxiety, like stepping up to that plate, knowing what I was a part of. So that past experience, it served as motivation. And I consumed business books, courses, articles, case studies, got certifications, pursuing best practices of leading an organization that would not only produce high performance, the desired outcomes, but healthy high performance. Over the last 10 years, I have learned so much as I've pursued this aspiration. My biggest takeaway over the last 10 years is that I must be a forever student of how to do this well. And that's why today I want to present myself to you more as a practitioner and a colleague of sorts, instead of some sort of teacher or expert. And from that perspective, I would like to share with you some things that have worked out for me really well as I've gone through this journey of trying to be someone that is worthy of approaching the power of hope. So first, some context on what that new role was and how in the trenches of it, I discovered some important methods of leading operations that allowed me to begin to approach the power of hope. Here's some passages, students, on Mount Precipice, and that's in Nazareth, and what he is overlooking is the Valley of Armageddon. I was the second founding team member of Passages, and in 2016, my wife and I actually moved from Dallas to Chicago to start up the organization. Passages is a nonprofit organization that brings Christian college students over to Israel for a short-term 9-day trip with the aim of introducing them to the roots of their faith. There's a significant problem in America. That problem is culture. And a huge indicator of where culture is going is how many faithful young Christians there are in America today. And so our theory at Passages is, let's get as many influential leaders, Christian leaders, and introduce them to the roots of their faith, knowing that that would likely make them strong, amazing leaders. 4 years in, we had grown to a team of 20, and we had taken 8,000 students to Israel. At that moment, I found myself alone in our conference room, and I was reading some articles about this troubling news reports of a virus spreading globally. And this is March 2020. And at that time, COVID-19 was still not considered a serious threat in the United States. But at that time, we had 250 students in Israel on the ground halfway through their tour. And so I'm hearing what's going on with our students. I'm hearing what's going on in Asia, and it's actually creeping into the Middle East. And then I'm hearing about how Israel is responding to this situation. There were rumors of border closures and the airport shut down in Israel. So I texted our CEO. He was in New York doing donor meetings, and I was like, dude, you got to get home. We've got to talk about some things. This is getting really serious. So he actually left right there, got on a plane, rolled into Chicago. 5 hours later, I had the team gathered. And I remember I took 5 minutes to brief him and everyone. This is what I've read. This is what I've heard, not just globally, Israel specific. This is where our students are. And then I laid out a very radical and unpopular decision, as true COOs do, 9 to 5. We need to evacuate the students. And so then it became a ruckus debate for 36 hours, and we turned over every stone of what that would mean on a PR level, business, insurance, financial, impact. Are we being too hasty? Have we missed the window already? But we ultimately made the decision 36 hours later to bring them home. And the day that our students landed in the US, Israel closed its borders, and it shut down its airport. We would not see the Holy Land again. We didn't know it at the time, but for another 18 months. So I will pause there, and I'll introduce the key concept I want to bring to this story today. And I'm actually going to borrow the concept from Stephen Covey, who's the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's the first habit. It's the habit of proactivity. And this is what he has to say about that habit. Being proactive is about taking responsibility for your life. Proactive people recognize that they are response-able. They do not blame circumstances or conditions for their behavior. They know that they can choose their behavior. So as I led this organization, I realized that while hope fueled our vision, gave us motivation, gave us inspiration, was the reason why we woke up and did that work, there were 3 key spaces that needed to be addressed proactively to begin to harness the power of hope in a healthy way. In these spaces, I found that it was important to implement operational best practices to guard against dysfunction creeping in. So the first space is a space of paper. And in this one, I learned that I needed to proactively create 2 ruthlessly aligned guiding documents. We know as Christian leaders that we are to write the vision and make it plain so that those that see it can run with it. And up until my point at Passages, I had really focused on the write the vision and skipped over make it plain so that people can run with it. But at my time at Passages, I really understood that it's the make it plain part that allows people to run with it. And the way that I define make it plain in our context today is ruthlessly aligned clarity. This ruthlessly aligned clarity can be found in 2 documents. First, it's a foundational document. This document answers, why does your organization exist? And because that question is so important, it has its own document to answer that question. Then the natural questions is, all right, okay, that's why you exist. So tell me, what do you do and how do you do it? That's the operational playbook. There are 12 sections in these 2 documents as we designed it, and each of these 12 sections deploys a very specific business best practice, principle, or model that gets to that idea of ruthlessly aligned clarity. So a couple stories to kind of drive home the importance of this best practice in this space. One is a parable. There was an orange grove selling its final harvest for the season, and there were 2 companies fighting over its crop. One company says, we need the oranges to help make a drug that is going to save lives. The second company says, we need the oranges to be able to feed our hungry community. And after days of debate, it looked like the farmer was not going to be able to choose between these 2 noble causes. Then the first company, a bit resigned and frustrated, said, how are the orange peels going to sustain hunger in your community? And the second company looked at them like, it's not. The orange juice will, though. And then in 5 minutes, a deal was struck. Company number 1 got the orange peels. Company number 2 got the orange juice. They actually split the price of the crop, and the farmer got paid. And everybody was the winner. Without documents like this or ruthlessly aligned clarity, however you produce it, we become victims of the curse of knowledge. Curse of knowledge illustrated in this story is a cognitive bias that occurs when someone assumes that others have the same level of information and knowledge that you do about a particular topic. Second story is a story between me and my beloved wife. We love buffalo wings. It was often date night when we were dating, engaged, and still to today. We love pluckers mostly. We split medium wings. And for the first 5 years, we did this cute little song and dance where I would give Maggie the buffalo drumsticks because that's the best part of buffalo wings. It's got the most meat. They're delicious. She would give me the wings. This went on for 5 years, hundreds of wings eaten, until one day we sit down, hot steaming plate of buffalo wings, and Maggie, with this kindness in her eyes, looks across, grabs a drumstick and says, you know, I give you the wings because I love you. They're my favorite. And I said, what? So from that point, now we have switched. Now I eat the drumsticks, she gets the wings, and everyone is also the winner. This story illustrates that without ruthless clarity, our well-intentions may produce unnecessary inefficiencies. Nice is not kind. Clear is kind, because it allows full understanding to exist. So, my world before these documents and then after these documents. The first couple of years, we did not have these documents established in passages. And because of that, we were just shooting from the hip. The way that we would describe ourselves is we were a plane taking off and putting on the wings as it was going. And it felt like that. But because of that, we didn't spend a lot, the appropriate time to make it plain, which means there were some gaps in how we articulated why we exist, what we do, and how we do it. And because of those gaps, we would all stumble over our words. We all talked about the organization a very different way. We would second guess certain decisions because we hadn't actually taken time to proactively determine what's our guidepost here. Because of those gaps, we were circumstance-led at time because we just didn't know, is this right or wrong? We didn't think about it proactively. Because of the gaps, competing agendas were allowed to kind of fill some of these gaps, oftentimes from donors. And then ultimately, without more of a foggy picture of what we did, mission drift was a true threat. But once we took the time, and it took 3 full days to get to the articulation of these documents, we were able to leverage it from that point forward. Communications were concise. We were all saying the same thing the same way in an effective manner. It made our decision-making much more calculated. We were confident that we were leading circumstances now and they were not leading us. And every contribution, including donors, were fully aligned. And we were confident that we had mission focus. So what makes the alignment ruthless? Why do I keep using that word? There's another word that I'll throw out there that kind of gets to the status of ruthless. And it's a powerful word, no. It's the COO's favorite word, and the CFO. Clarity is ruthlessly aligned when you not only make very clear why you exist, what you do, and how you do it, but why you do not exist, what you will not do, and how you will not do it, because your resources are limited, and God gave you a vision for this thing, not that thing. And so by establishing the yeses and the nos, you provide bumpers to keep you focused. It's fun to say yes. It's easy to say yes. It is hard to say no. It is not fun to say no. But by proactively establishing what that no boundary is, you will be equipped better in those moments. So what do some smarter people than me have to say about this idea? So Indra Nooyi, who is the former CEO of PepsiCo, says whatever you do, you have to be passionate about it, you have to have a vision, and you have to articulate it. Make it plain. Jack Welch, former CEO of GE, good business leaders create a vision, articulate that vision, make it plain, and relentlessly drive it to completion. This is a young woman having some prayer time in the Garden of Gethsemane on a passages trip. So let's go back to the story. So how did these documents help us navigate COVID? Within weeks, we were asking ourselves the obvious question. What are we going to do to survive? We are an international travel organization being thrusted into a global pandemic. Now, we had partners that were in this industry with us, and many of our partners were changing their business model, a lot of them to domestic things. And really, there was a lot of wisdom in that, right? And we had to make some really smart decisions to ensure that our donors would stay with us. We couldn't do our core activity. So what we did was we pulled out the guiding documents. And for better or for worse, guiding document number 1, the why said, why does this organization exist? To bring young Christian college students over to Israel, a physical travel event. And so it was a very hard decision. Some may even say it was foolish, but we said, we're just going to stick to our guns. Like, this is what we do. We're not going to let go of our trips team. We are going to keep our trips team, and we're going to plan the next trip season. And we're going to keep planning the next trip season until we can get back to doing what we do. But because we made that decision, the next best question was able to arise. What are you going to do with your time? And that was a fun question to entertain. And so some of the things that we did during those 18 months was we turned a challenge into an opportunity. One radical thing we did was we relocated the organization from Chicago to Dallas, which we would have never been able to entertain that monstrous idea with running hundreds and thousands of students of trips, throughout the year. It was a strategic moment for us. Dallas is a better fit. It saved the organizations and our team members hundreds of thousands of dollars on a tax level. And as you all know, Dallas has a thriving Christian philanthropic scene. And so we were able to do that. Another thing we were able to do is we were able to take a pause, take a step back, and look at our registration process. When we started Passages on day one, we started and we did not stop running. But all of a sudden, we were not just not running, we were sitting down on the bleachers. And because of that, our process of registration was a little clunky, and our software system was absolutely terrible. But we were able to take a step back and be like, let's refine the process, and let's take the time to implement new software, which actually took about 3 months, but we had the time. And so now our trips team, they actually still were working full-time, overtime, implementing a new system. And because we were able to do that, we were able to increase the efficiency of our registration process by 35%, which at the end of the day made our donor dollar go so much farther. So once we have this clarity on paper, the next challenge is, how do you bring this clarity to life? Because we all love a good brainstorm, right? We like a good whiteboard. We like to put it on paper. We like to save that document in Google Drive, but then we have to get back to work. Oftentimes that thing collects dust. Vision statements sometimes become nice posters on the wall. But how do we take that hard work and bring it to life? That's where we address the space of time. In the space of time, we proactively establish a menu of strategic events on our calendar throughout the year. Without these, the value and power of the guiding documents do not get used. Over the years, I discovered there are 8 events that have a specific timing on the calendar, a very specific agenda, and desired outcomes that if we would place them there proactively, they would lead us to important conversations at the right time, at the right place, to be talking about the right things. So I want to use a metaphor to kind of bring this one home, and it's the metaphor of the sand and stones and bucket. Maybe you've heard this before. But imagine with me, I know you guys are all busy and you're taking an hour out here to hang out with us today, but you've got projects, you've got tasks, and let's throw them all on the table. And there's the important ones. They're the size of stones. There's the kind of important ones. Those are the pebbles. And then there's the urgent, annoying ones that just seems to be a mountain of sand, all right? And then you've got a bucket. And this bucket is time. And you only get one bucket. You're not going to get any more. And sand it was really cool when we were kids, but now it's just irritating. Sand is irritating. Just like the urgent tasks that come at you and the fires you have to put out every single week. And because of that energy, it is really tempting to put the sand in the bucket first. Then if we just kind of follow that logic and philosophy, we're going to grab the pebbles, put them in next, and then we're going to go for the stones, and maybe there's 5 stones here and we can fit a couple in, but because of our order of events, we've now run out of room. And there are important things left on the table. So what I discovered, and it took a couple years to find this out, is that there's 8 key events. I'll call them the stones. All right, that if we proactively put them on our calendar, we can prevent this kind of activity from happening. There's 2 annual events. It's a strategic planning retreat, 2 to 3 days, and then a team retreat, a couple days. There is a quarterly full-day strategic where you're reviewing that plan throughout the year. There's 2 monthly events, a scorecard review and a performance review. And weekly, there's 3, a pop-up, a team meeting, and one-on-ones. And I will actually have a digital download guide that captures some of this stuff for you so you can kind of dive into it, because I know I'm going pretty quick here. And that sounds like a lot of meetings to juggle, right? But let's do some math. Let's just say you work 50 hours or 50 weeks a year. You have 2 weeks of vacation, 40 hours a week. None of y'all work more than 40 hours a week, right? Okay, great. That's that nonprofit life. That would be 2,000 hours, all right? Give or take. If you put all of these events, these 8 events on the calendar proactively, and let's say you have like 3 direct reports, all right? So this can flux a little bit. Any guesses on how many hours that would be for the entire year? It's 172. That's 8.5% of your total time, which leaves over 90% of your time freed up to execute the pebbles and the sand without stress that the important is going to be left behind. With these events we proactively schedule, we guard a sacred space for the important things, and we allow a necessary space for the urgent things. Just because they're urgent doesn't mean that they don't need to get done. And just because they're urgent doesn't mean that they're not also important sometimes too. But there's a category of important but not urgent. And that's the one that you've got to address. And it's the one that if we don't proactively schedule, we'll always say, I'll get to it tomorrow. And tomorrow never comes. So how did this best practice change our worlds? Whoops, let's go back one more. As you can imagine, without just kind of like nothing on the calendar and just running with the to-do list, like I was overwhelmed by it all. Overwhelmed in the sense that like everything felt important and everything felt urgent. And for some reason, I don't know if you guys experience, why does every task feel like it's gonna take an hour? Like everything's an hour. Distraction led, right? Because you're kind of like, what do I do? And then like something comes at you and be like, oh, thanks for leading me. I'll do that. The important is always out of reach, as we talked about. It's always in tomorrow. Mind always swimming because you're just not organized. But then once we implemented this, I felt organized and clear. Things were actually getting done. I was excited and confident that I was doing what I prioritized. And this one's really cool. Like the important comes to you. It's on the calendar. Like it will show up for you. And then this one's important too, is it allows your brain to turn off at night. Because you know tomorrow is not just tomorrow, it's scheduled. Those important they're on and I can go home and I can be a husband to my wife, I can be a father to my kids, and at the end of the day, that's really important. But without it at home, just kind of fogging and halfway able to be in the other roles of my life. So what do some smarter people than me have to say about this? And I would say too, if you have not read these 2 books, 2 of the most impactful books that I have ever read as it relates to productivity. So one is James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits. He says, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And then Cal Newport, author of Deep Work, to-do lists can be a trap. If you work from a list, you'll respond to what seems most urgent. If you work from a schedule, you're more likely to respond to what is most important. Paul shares some words with us too. In Ephesians, he says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. And then what does he say right after that? Making the best use of time. Because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Now, all of these 8 events are important, like members in a band. But there are a couple that stand out and helped us tremendously during COVID. And so we're just going to call these 2 the guitar soloist because everyone loves a good guitar solo, all right? They were the monthly ones, all right? The monthly scorecard review and the monthly performance review. And maybe the idea of a monthly performance review is new to you. I'm going to break that down a little bit. But first, the power of the monthly scorecard review for us during COVID. We had no idea what we were doing. Like nobody had any idea what we were doing. So we were coming up with ideas and plans left and right. And an idea and a plan, like you can leave that brainstorm session and be like, that's good. And maybe it is good, but it's a theory. It's maybe good. What tells you if it's good or not is results and data. And so we would plan something, not knowing what we were doing, and we would throw it out there. And one of the things that we launched was passages at home. So we can't bring you to Israel, we're going to bring Israel to you, right? Very cute. And it worked. Like the first month, we reviewed the data, the scorecard, and our social media engagement, which was a huge struggle for us, probably a struggle for everyone, it like skyrocketed by 200%. We were like, we have never seen this before. But then we were like, let's not be like too naive, like everyone's at home on their computer. So like everyone's engagement was up. But then the next month, it was up even more. So we were like, awesome, let's keep going. Month 3, we went all the way back down to baseline. So what did we do in month 4? We killed it. And we didn't go 1 month too long doing something like that because we did not want to burn out our audience and our alumni. Then the next one was the monthly performance review. And this is how we executed it at Passages. This is hands down, out of all of the 3 spaces, all of the best practices. If you were to find a way to implement one thing, it would be this. What we would do is 1 month, the manager would review the team member. Then the next month, the team member would review the manager. And that would go back and forth all year long to where you get to the end of the year where the yearly review was simply a review of all 12 of those conversations. Because how can you actually reflect back of 12 months of performance? That's difficult. 8 weeks is much more manageable though. And the unorthodox part of this, 1 is the cadence, but 2, the direct report having the opportunity to assess the manager. And this was the theory that, or an idea I had was like, how can I expect, their performance is dependent upon my performance as a manager. I've got to know how I'm doing. And so and I'll tell you, for the direct reports do not like that conversation. It is very, like they're talking to boss, all right? And the boss effect is real, right? Like if you're founder, CEO, or if you're a manager, we can try and like be cool at the water cooler all day long, but at the end of the day, like it's just a real thing. So it's better to like actually embrace the dynamic and manage it responsibly. And one of the ways that we did that is like, I'm actually gonna give you a proactive moment where you can assess me. I'm actually going to give you a rubric too that helps you find some points of articulation so that you don't feel like you're, being mean to your boss and you're going to like be retaliated for that. What the magic of this is what happens is the direct report gives a review of the manager, and then what it does is it allows the direct report to observe how the manager responds to critical feedback. It push away the numbers and the review. It's that response that communicates to the direct report, they really are for me. And what it does is it brings a confidence in the team member to continue to bring critical feedback every single day outside of the review. So this conversation, because we were navigating such uncertainty, was what carried our culture through 18 months of COVID. This is a young lady. She's on the Mount of Olives overlooking the old city. That's the eastern gate right there. So after all of this, we've got paper and time. What's the last space we need to address? It is the space of our mind. We must proactively fill this space by thinking out loud with people that are smarter than us and impartial to our situation. The space of our mind is powerful and tricky. One of the best ways to steward that power is to get thoughts out loud. When we do that, we hear that the silly thoughts are silly. We hear that the important thoughts are important. And we hear that the fearful thoughts are lies. When I was early in Chicago, I got the opportunity to have lunch with Lou Mastro, who was the CEO of Edward Elmhurst Hospital for over 20 years. It was one of the most prestigious hospitals in the world, and you may be wondering, how did this short little redhead that looks like he's 12 and get carded for spray paint get an audience with such a prestigious leader? She also doubles as my aunt, so that's really why we met. But I was excited to have lunch with her because now I was an executive too, And like, we've got some things in common. I was like, please give me advice. And she was like, first tell me about your job. And so I got to tell her about the amazing work we were doing, all of the new challenges that I was taking on, how this is very different than being a youth pastor. I've got 8 direct reports. I've got 8 departments. There's P&Ls, there's balance sheets, and she listened, and I told her about my stressors and my pressures. And at the very, very end, she just listened. She gave me only one piece of advice, and it's the only advice she ever gave me. And it's probably one of the best advice I've ever got and the greatest values I've ever received. She said, Jeremy, I'm so proud of you. That sounds like amazing work. I really do understand the stresses and pressures you're under. I've been doing stuff like this for 20 years. Because I love you as my nephew and my godson, I want to let you know that if you are not getting professional counseling and coaching at least twice a month, you are going to burn out within the year. She said, I've been seeing a professional coach for twice a week for all of this time, and I credit those 2 hours to the reason why I'm actually still CEO today. And I was like, okay, go see a counselor, right? Didn't do it. Then COVID hit, okay? And all of the stresses and pressures immediately felt 3 times heavier, and it actually drove me to the activity. And it's just, if you've ever been there, it's a challenging moment to just kind of like initiate that conversation. But once I did, she was right. Like, she absolutely was right. And I did not understand that there was a conversation and a value and a train of thought that I had never touched. Because I was unwilling to be vulnerable in someone that I didn't know. This is where I also understood the importance of talking with a professional that is impartial to your situation. So what do I mean by that? It means that when I talk to Maggie, who's my greatest advisor, most powerful advisor, it's a fantastic conversation. She makes me kinder, like 100%. But my choices do affect her. And that's neither good or bad. It's just an ingredient of the dynamic, and it affects how we talk to each other and how we think out loud. When I talk to my business coach, my choices don't affect her at all. When she clicks end on Zoom, she doesn't think about me until I get back on the other call. And I didn't realize it, but that plays a significant role in the dynamic. And I found a way to think out loud that I've never engaged before. And I know this for certain, and maybe you can resonate with this. The best thinking I've ever done was out loud, vulnerably, in front of someone that was smarter than me. The worst thinking I've ever done was silent, in my head, with no one able to contribute to my train of thought, and that train often went to crazy town more times than not. So how did this best practice change my world? Without it, overly stressed, irritable and short, led by insecurities, foggy and pessimistic, isolated and anxious. With it, was fresh and optimistic, self-aware and attentive, led by humility, clear and energetic, and honestly, best self for others. I was able to offboard stress and anxiety, wonders, worries, and leave them there. I didn't have to take them home. They were right there, and they would kind of get resolved. And I'll tell you this too, in these conversations, what's unique is oftentimes by talking out loud with someone like this, I would lead myself to the next best solution. There's just something powerful about someone holding that space for you. So what do smarter people than me have to say about it? Sheryl Sandberg, former COO of Facebook. A mentor is someone who sees the potential in you when you do not see it for yourself. Eric, former Google CEO, says the one thing people are never good at is seeing themselves as others see them. A coach really, really helps. So I will wrap up here. And as I reflect back at my time at Passages, I look back at these 3 spaces, the best practices we've deployed, and I can say that they absolutely were truly pillars to our success. So one thing that we did, we stuck to our guns, and we planned season after season. We did that 3 times and had to cancel the trips. And I'm telling a team that would market, recruit, register, logistics, 2 weeks before the trip, fall through the floor. And it was maddening. It was discouraging. Like the morale was horrible. But then round 4 came. We marketed, we recruited, we registered. We put our nose to the door of Israel, it opened, and we fell in. And 500 students sought to go back to the Holy Land in 2021 for the first time in 18 months. And there was nothing more rewarding, energizing, satisfying, a sense of fulfillment than seeing our hope come to life. What we found out, too, with a report from the Israeli tourism industry at the end of the year, is that passages represented nearly 20% of all tourism in 2021. And because we stuck to our guns, as you can imagine, there was a market share that we were able to grab immediately because we were very warm on our skill. So let me just jump to the end here because I know we're running out of time, and I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to share some things with you here. As we discussed, there's important things that we need to deploy because we don't want hope to be something that can be used in a manipulative sense. We want it to be used for what it is. And I learned that deploying best practices, specifically in paper, filling it with ruthlessly aligned clarity, time with a menu of strategic events, and space in our mind with thinking out loud. Doing these 3 things are ways that we can approach the power of hope and leverage it for what it is. So, Ed and Tim, thank you so much for inviting me here today. You've got an amazing thing going here. I know how important it is for warriors and leaders of the work that you are doing to rub shoulders with each other. This is truly the essence of ironing and sharpening iron. And so thanks for just putting this community together and some time to share with you today. I'll hand it over to you.